Hello there. Sometimes when you're riding along on your bike, your brakes can make all kinds of noises. From the squeakies all the way to what I call the banshee. So in this video, I'm going to explain why that happens and show you a number of different ways that you can fix it so that they don't make any noise anymore. Let's get to it. So there's a number of reasons that your brakes can be making all kinds of noise. Reason number one, they could just be wet. They could just be wet from water, and you'll just need them to dry out until they stop making noise. That was actually how I got mine to make that crazy banshee noise. So if you've just recently washed off your bike and rinsed it off, and then you go ride it right away, it's probably gonna make all kinds of brake noises, and that's just totally normal. Let them dry, should go away. If it's dried for a while and it hasn't gone away, the brake pads could potentially be contaminated. And that usually means that either oil or some type of cleanser or something got into the pads. And in that case, you'd need to replace your brake pads. And I'll leave a link in the description below to a video showing how you can replace your brake pads, how to remove them, because I will be removing these ones, and how to install new brake pads. Another thing, it could just be that the rotor's dirty, and there's a really easy fix for that. All you need to do is grab some rubbing alcohol, just at the store, and you can use like nail polish, acetone, any of that kind of stuff, but just regular old, store-bought rubbing alcohol. It's inexpensive, it's non-toxic. Just put it on a clean rag, and this is probably the easiest thing to do, and just wipe off the rotor. You can kind of squeeze it in between the rotor, and then just gently kind of clean your rotor as you're going around, and go all the way around till you got all the gunk and stuff off of there. And you should see on your rag, this is kind of a dark rag so you can't see it as well, but there's a bunch of dirt and grime in there. And see if that takes care of it. You just go out and ride your bike again. And if the squeaking and squealing's gone, then you're all done. But another reason that it can start squealing is if you look really close into the rotor, you'll see these little lines that start getting cut into it. And basically what can happen is it's sort of like a record where there's parts in the brake pad that are semi-metallic. Even on organic pads, there's pieces of the brake pad that are denser than others, and they cut these little grooves into your rotor. And sometimes those little grooves can match with the brake pads and create this kind of squealing, loud harmonic noise. So what we need to do is actually resurface the rotor and the brake pads. And I'll show you right now how you do that manually and thoroughly resurface them. And then towards the end, I'll also show you a cool product that kind of cuts part of that time down and can work really good so that you can do this while leaving everything on your bike. So you don't have to take your wheel off to do this, but we do have to remove the brake pads out of the caliper. And I'll leave a link in the description below to my video on how to do that. But right now I'm going to remove this caliper off of here and take the brake pads out and show you how I resurface those. So to do this, you're just gonna need some sandpaper. I just use like 100 grit sandpaper, 120 is fine. You don't need anything too gnarly. And then you have your old brake pads out, and you can see, if you look up close, you can see they're a little glossed over and kind of dirty. So all I'm gonna do is just put them face down, and you wanna do this on a flat surface. And just put them face down on the sandpaper, and you're literally gonna just sand them a bit. And then you're just basically taking off a thin surface of them until they're completely have a fresh surface. And you gotta push down pretty hard, but you don't gotta sand them forever. And then just using a clean cloth, just kind of wipe them off a little bit. And then you can see it's a nice clean surface pad, and here's the old one. So you can kind of compare the old one here to the new one there. Technically it's still an old one, but that's a freshly resurfaced one. And if you look real close, you can see these kind of shinier bits in there. Those are the more dense areas of the brake pad. And those are what can cut those lines into the rotor. So just take your brake pads off, sand them both down. Just nice and good until you have a nice clean surface on it. And then just wipe with a clean rag. You don't want to wipe any gunk back onto it. So make sure that you're not using an oily rag or one that you've used for cleaners. And then you have this nice clean surface there again. And then the brake pads almost look brand new again. And then we're going to put these back on the bike, and I'm going to show you how to resurface the rotor itself also. So now I've got those freshly resurfaced pads back in the caliper, and now we're going to actually resurface the rotor itself. And as you can see, zoom in here. So see these lines that I showed before that are all grooved in there? Well, we need to get rid of all those lines. So after you've used the rubbing alcohol and clean this rotor off really good, then you want to grab your sandpaper. And usually what I do first is just kind of pinch it around and just lightly spin it into the sandpaper. And always do this just really carefully because you don't want to get your fingers caught in the rotor. And we're just going to go around a couple of times like this, just to take some of that surface off. And then what you really need to do is get in here and actually like sand this thing down. And you kind of need to go across those lines. So kind of in a diagonal or up and down sort of motion. You don't just want to sand this direction. You kind of want to sand against them. Because what I'm trying to do is interrupt all those little grooves and lines and get rid of them. This is basically what machining does with a machine, of course. And we're just doing it manually by hand. So we're just removing all those little grooves and stuff in here. And once you get one side really good, you can take your clean rag and just lightly dust all that off. Just kind of gently cleaning it. And if you can look in there real close, you'll see that now it has grooves kind of going against the grain. But that's just on this one outside. We also need to do the same thing on the inside. So you have to get in here and sand the inside also. So just keep going all the way around. And you can be kind of going at an angle like this or straight up and down. Just not directly along with it. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just want to interrupt those little grooves. Because once we're finished with this, I'm going to go outside and show you how to rebed in the new brake pads. Whether you have new brake pads or if you've just resurfaced your brake pads or if you've just bought the bike brand new, you need to bed in the brake pads into the rotor, and then that's going to keep them from wanting to howl in the future. But they can still cut enough grooves and start howling again. So none of it's perfect, but this is just how you manually do this, like at the bike shop. And then just clean all that kind of dust and stuff off that you got. Now you got a nicely surfaced rotor and nicely surfaced new brake pads in here. And then we're going to go bed this in, and I'll show you how to do that. But first, I'm going to show you this other product that you can use, and I'll show you on the front rotor over here so that you don't have to do all this manually, but I wanted to show what I'm doing manually so that this will actually make sense. So let's head over to the front rotor. So this stuff is called Squeal Out, and it's got a little piggy on it. So this is basically designed just to do what I just did manually on the back, but you can just paste it on. It's basically like liquid sandpaper. So see, it's this kind of liquidy stuff, and all you need to do to use this, and I'll leave a link in the description below for this stuff, is kind of paste it onto your rotor like so. And you don't need to go all the way around your rotor, but you do want to get it on both sides. So just kind of paste a good glop like that on there. And then rotate that glop so it's up into the calipers. And then squeeze the brake lever a few times. So you're kind of crunching that squeal out paste into the brake pads. And what that's going to do is it's going to coat the rotor and the brake pads, and then we're going to go outside and bed these brake pads in, and it's going to kind of self-sand and resurface itself. And this stuff's pretty cool. This stuff works pretty often. It's not perfect. You may have to do it a couple of times. Doing it manually is definitely better, but this can also work, and it's a whole lot easier. So Squeal Out, it's pretty cool stuff. So let me show you how to burn these in. So on the back rotor, I did it manually, and then on the front rotor, I'm going to use the Squeal Out and bed both of them in. But one thing to remember with the Squeal Out is that it does take a day or so for the brakes to kind of come back and grip. This pasty stuff needs to completely dry out and disappear. So something to consider. Definitely read the directions on the bottle first, but it's really easy to use. And then over time, less than a day or so, your brake power comes right back and it's all quiet. So let's go outside and I'll show you how to bed these in. So to bed your brake pads in, it's pretty simple. All you need to do is just get a little speed going and then just grab onto the brake. I'm just going to do the rear for now until you come to a stop. And then get a little speed going again. And then just grab your rear brake until you come to a stop. And you're grabbing it pretty firm. You basically want to be able to get enough speed so that you can grab your brake and have it go around at least a full rotation. And you're pulling on it pretty tight. And each time you do it, it should get a bit stronger and stronger. So the back one's the one that I just manually resurfaced. So this one I'm really just bedding in the brake. And then the front one, which is this guy over here, is the one that I put the Squeal Out on. So that's the one that I'm actually got to go around, and it's not going to come to a very good stop with that paste on it. But what it's doing is it's crunching that paste into the rotor, and it's sanding it kind of as I'm riding right now. So you just kind of want to get some speed and just grind that Squeal Out paste into the rotor. I'm going to go up this and then down this. And just keep doing that over and over again, probably like 7 or 8 times till you really ground that rotor down. So everything I just did manually, the Squeal Out is doing just kind of while I'm riding. And you can kind of hear it. Well, I don't know if you can hear it through a mic, but I can hear it as I'm riding, kind of grinding that rotor down. And then just keep in mind when you're using the Squeal Out that it does take about a day or so for the brakes to come back. You can get in there and wipe some of that off, but don't wipe any of it off like right after you've been grinding it, because the rotor's going to be really hot. And that's about all there is to it. Now you've resurfaced your rotors and rebedded them in, so they should be all good to go. So just to recap on everything I did. So the first thing is just if your brakes are wet, they're simply gonna make noise. There's no way around it. But it should be temporary. Once they dry out, they should stop making noise if that was the cause. And then if they're contaminated, then they will never dry out and they'll just keep making noise all the time, and then you'll have to replace the brake pads. And you may even have to replace the rotors. So I'll do another video showing how you can replace your brake rotors, but I do have that video in the description below on how to take out your brake pads and replace them if necessary. And then lastly, and the most likely, is that the brake pads have cut those little lines into the rotors, and they're just making the harmonic that just squeals like a banshee. And then if that's the case, then you have to either use the Squeal Out or you have to manually resurface them yourself and then bed them back in. And then you should be all good to go. So if you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up, hit the like button. If you like more tips like this on electric bikes and just how to work on your own bike, subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. And I have a whole playlist here that I'll leave in the corner of more things that you can do to work on your own bike and keep it working great. Thanks again.